Welcome everybody to this extraordinary council meeting, 2nd September 2021. Quickly moving on, I'll skip the council blessing. You had one this morning. Item 3, apologies. Any apologies? No. Item number 4, declarations of interest. No. Public speaking time. Have you got anybody in public speaking time?
No, we don't.
No, we don't. Members' business, public speaking time responses. No. Leave of absence. No. Matters of an urgent nature. Nothing. Straight into item number 7, reports. Changes to council calendar of meetings during COVID-19 response. So our legal counsel, Sarah, will introduce the report. Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Thank you for making the time to attend this extraordinary meeting this afternoon at short notice. So I will try and keep it brief. I understand you've had a busy morning. So what I'll do is I'll just touch on the key points in the paper for the benefit of those who might not have had an opportunity to read it. Provide an overview. We also have Janice and Tim here, and then we can take, so collectively the three of us can take questions at the end. So in terms of the purpose of today's meeting, what we are seeking is a decision on which meetings of council, in terms of our usual calendar of meetings, should take place while the Wellington region is at either alert level 3, which we currently are, or alert level 4 in response to the COVID pandemic. Most of you will have seen the report, and what we are seeking today or recommending in the report is an approach consistent with the approach taken in 2020 during the outbreak last year. I'll just touch on, before I jump into the recommendation, I'll touch on some of the constraints that I'm sure we're all familiar with at the moment. So while we're at alert level 3 and 4, the recommendation is that all staff and elected members continue to operate from home. And so what we need to consider is how council can continue to operate as effectively as possible under the current settings, while of course limiting the risk of transmission and managing other factors such as the well-being of both staff and elected members, as well as the legislative requirements that that exist under the Local Government Official Information Meetings Act in terms of ensuring that official meetings that continue to take place do so and are open to the public in terms of being broadcast by either audio or video link. So under either alert level 3 or 4, there are some obvious resourcing constraints for both elected members and staff. Elected members who are working from home, some of you will be looking after children, or others are impacted in terms of your time to dedicate to governance activities. In terms of staff, staff face the same resourcing constraints with many juggling 2 jobs at the moment, which is impacting on the ability for staff to provide the necessary support for all meetings that ordinarily take place. That support, even with COVID changes to the legislation, requires the distribution of agendas, minutes, and the facilitation of the technology that we need to enable these meetings to be open to the public. So that is the purpose of the meeting today. The recommendation that we have put forward in the report, which, as I mentioned, is consistent with the approach taken last year, is that only meetings of council, the Strategy and Operations Committee, and the Audit and Risk Committee take place under alert levels 3 or 4, and that all other meetings of council decision-making bodies, including community boards, are cancelled. Those meetings that are cancelled would be reinstated once the region moves out of alert levels 3 or 4, so moves back to alert level 2 or lower. And importantly, if the region is at alert level 3 or 4 for an extended period of time, so we're talking months rather than weeks, then staff would need to bring a further report to council to revisit the approach to ensure that any key decision-making activities of subcommittees or community boards can continue over that time. That obviously depends on how effectively the government is able to contain the current or future outbreaks. It's also important to note that while this option would cancel official meetings, so those that are open to the public of some committees or community boards, while the region is at alert level 3 or 4, there would be nothing to prevent these decision-making bodies from meeting in an unofficial or informal capacity if they are able to do so. For example, that might be necessary to work on a joint submission for any of the matters that Council is currently consulting on, for example, the representation review. Just to be really clear, it would not be appropriate for committees or local boards to meet to carry out official business during this time, for example, to issue grants to community members. Council will not be able to retrospectively ratify any resolutions made in an unofficial or informal capacity. So that I think is an overview of what we are recommending. I might hand it over to you, Mr. Mayor, to take any questions that that our elected members might have.
Right. Any questions? Press the raise hand button. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. I've just rigged up a whole new setup in the last half hour. So my understanding of these recommendations is that these are only in force for the current alert level 4 and 3. And if, say, we go to 2 or 1, and then at the future we come back into 3 or 4, we'd need to do this again, or do these apply whenever we go in and out of those alert levels? I'm
happy to take that question. So if you have a look at the recommendations, I think at recommendation E, 1E, what we are recommending is that these, if adopted, these recommendations would take immediate effect. And then if we are to move back into alert level 3 or 4, for example, if there is a sort of an up and down approach to being able to contain the outbreak in the Wellington region, that the same approach would apply, unless, of course, the government isn't able to contain the outbreak as effectively as we might hope, and we're looking at an extended outbreak for months rather than weeks. At that point, what we're proposing is that we would bring a further report back to Council where we might need to tweak some of the recommendations in this report to ensure that key decision-making activities can continue. Does that answer your question?
Yep. And just a quick follow-up. Why a period of greater than 3 days? Because presumably we could have a situation where it's announced at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday that we're going into lockdown from 11:59 p.m. that night. Presumably in that scenario, would we be unable to have the council meeting the following day, or how would that scenario work? Because I'm sort of aware that we're not likely to have the same sort of, I guess, forewarning that we had in terms of March last year, with the government wanting to move very quickly in terms of Delta to move to level 3 or 4 if they need to.
So the reason that we've put for a period of greater than 3 days is that if this approach would likely be necessary in terms of the cancellation of meetings forecast into the next week or so, only if it was for more than 3 days. That wouldn't prevent us from making decisions to cancel a meeting that might be, say, the day after the government decides that we need to go back into lockdown, similar to what happened this time. But that's really, we felt that threshold was appropriate for this to kick back into this to apply if there was a further outbreak. I'm happy to look at that though if councillors feel that isn't an appropriate time frame.
No, I'm happy to defer to your advice of that. I was just trying to understand the rationale behind that specific time period, and that works really well. Thank you.
Okay.
Just to chip in here, Gwen, I think the resolution E is starting to make this sort of anticipation business as usual. We are normalizing what is going to be disruptive.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. It's just making sure that we're not having to come and do these extraordinary council meetings every time. So that's really good, I think. So yeah.
Cool. Martin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, just making an inquiry. Obviously the two main committee meetings everyone's involved in, but the audit and risk is a smaller committee. If I wanted to attend the audit and risk committee meeting, would I do it in this sort of format, or would I have to zoom in as a public participant as such? I'm just curious.
Take that one. Yes, you could. I think the same rules apply virtually as they would around the council table. As a councillor, you are entitled to take a seat at the table and to ask questions at an audit and risk meeting, even though you have no voting rights, and the same would be true of an online audit and risk committee meeting.
That's cool. That was it for me. Thanks.
Right, anybody else a question? Doesn't seem like it. Hold on. What's happening here? Right, if there's nobody else asked. Oh, look.
We have
Sophie
Councillor
Handford.
Handford.
Sophie Handford.
Sorry, just one quick question. In terms of public participation on Zoom meetings, depending on how long we need to be doing this for, have you had any feedback from people who might have been in touch who, for some reason or another, couldn't access Zoom, so that then, disrupted or put up a wall to them participating in a council meeting? Like, have you had cases of that kind of over the last couple of weeks or last year where people couldn't participate?
I haven't received any feedback. Janice, did you want to make any comments on Councillor Handford's question?
I think that it is likely that there are some people for whom the fact that this meeting is happening online, that in itself would be a barrier to them. Even if they didn't voice that to us directly, we would perceive that would be the case. And I know that through some of our Zoom meetings that we had last time there was a lockdown, there were a few grumbles from people, but I don't think it's helpful to overstate the impact of those either, because actually at the moment at alert level 3 and 4, having a public participation via a Zoom meeting is the only option open to us really, and it's better than no option for public participation.
Martin, have you got your hand up, or you forgotten you got your hand up? Martin.
Yeah, look, again, just curious, with regards, we've got 2 or 3 consultation processes going to be kicking in, and we've got one going at the moment. Is this going to impact on the consultation processes as such? I guess not so much if it's a short-term lockdown at level 3, but if this sort of extends longer than we perhaps perceive it will, is there going to be a potential impact there to either postpone them or extend them or anything like that at all?
So lockdown will definitely have an impact of one kind or another on our consultation on various topics if we were consulting during lockdown. But in terms of the purposes of this paper doesn't speak, doesn't speak specifically to consultation, and certainly by continuing with meetings of the council and the strategy and operations committee, there is plenty of scope for decision making in relation to consultation exercises to be made.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Councillor Holbrook.
Yes, thank you for this report, and I agree that it's good that it covers future lockdowns as well. So my question's about briefings, which is a kind of within scope of some of the points made in this agenda. Paragraph 17, it says we're going to limit the number of agenda items to critical and time-dependent agenda items. And we also, and it also in the paper talks about the challenges for staff and also elected members. We've got the same approach happening with briefings.
Yes, the senior leadership team has reviewed the calendar of briefings at the same time as forming a view on what we thought could be, we could legitimately deliver and resource in terms of meetings. So only items that really are time sensitive and must continue while we're in lockdown will have briefings. If there are other things that are not time sensitive and certainly don't seem a priority given what else is going on, then we would look to shift those briefings.
Thank you. And another question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So in terms of the community grants made through the community boards, I remember last time there were funds that were made available for emergency response and things that were particularly to do with community challenges during the alert level changes. Would there be any opportunity for funding to be released for discretionary grants along those lines?
One of them, you go, Sarah.
I'll make a comment and then I'll hand over you, Janice. What I was going to say is the report recommends that that any decisions that would ordinarily be ones made by those meetings, those bodies that are where official meetings are cancelled at the moment, those decisions could be made by council. So if there were emergency grants that needed to be delivered to the community at this time, council could resolve on those matters. So there is a mechanism, but it is problematic if there are unofficial resolutions made on such things by bodies not conducting official business, where their meetings are not open to the public, and then there's a requirement to retrospectively say ratify the resolutions. So that's the reason why this is that's really clearly set out in the report, just to make that absolutely clear for all elected members if this is the approach that is adopted. Sorry, Janice.
Thank you.
No, that was perfect. That's what I was going to say.
Councillor Bravano.
Thank you for this, and I think it's really important to provide some really good guidelines as to how we, so that everyone knows what the story is. I have to say, though, and it touches on what Martin was saying about some more work that also needs to be done in terms of, giving some very strong, clear messages through something similar to this as to how consultation will be done through extended periods of being a level 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
Plus also too, it's interesting that you're saying that decisions can't be made by community boards retrospectively, because at this point in time we have the Waikanae Community Board does not have a deputy chair, and so that means that potentially that position could be pushed out, or you're even suggesting made by council. So I'd be interested to hear your comments on that. And I suppose also too, there's going to be a by-election, and what potentially what the ramifications are for that if we do have a serious lockdown.
Speak to those questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
So in terms of the by-election, that's obviously, there are a number of considerations in relation to that, given that we are currently at alert level 3. So that is definitely a conversation for a different forum where we can get into that in a little more detail. In terms of consultation and what we will or can and can't and will and won't do during alert level 3, we're essentially building the plane while we're flying there in terms of the modifications that we're making to our consultation approach on both particularly the representation review, but there are other items where we're out for consultation at the moment too. So you will see through the representation review work that will roll out over the next couple of weeks in practice what our approach to consulting on something significant during lockdown will look like. And we are meeting with the editorial committee that you established this afternoon to talk about that in more detail.
Yeah, so if I can just, sorry, off you go.
So I just wanted to add to Janice's point to say that there, and I think I've already said this in a different context, but there is nothing to stop us from convening a meeting, an extraordinary meeting of any committee if it is necessary. So we could bring forward either a further resolution or convene a meeting if there was a decision that needed to be made. But the key approach will be that any decisions that would ordinarily be made by other decision-making bodies who are not having meetings at this time could be made by council,
including
appointments,
yes.
anything of that, anything that council has the delegated power to determine.
I think there's a practical piece in there though in relation to the Waikanae Community Board not having a deputy chair at the moment. If meetings of the Waikanae Community Board are essentially on hold for now, then the impact of there not being a chair is limited. So my sense would be that the most appropriate time for that to be resolved would be at the next formal meeting of the council. Of the community board.
Saying that though, that okay then. Okay, so just another thing too. So Janice, I certainly agree that it's basically flying the plane as we're in the air. So just another consideration too is that I know with the process for the representation review, it's about meeting deadlines that are required by local government. And I think it's probably quite important to actually add into the mix there about whether the deadlines are being driven by the people or whether there is actually some scope within council to delay things for a better outcome, or potentially a better outcome, or more collaborative approach to things.
Just, I guess, a general comment in regards to that. The representation review is an example of something where we have no choice but to continue in our environment. But if we were to think ahead to future lockdown situations that may or may not occur, if we were intending to consult on something that didn't have the legislative timeframes to meet, one of the things that the SLT would need to consider is whether or not the challenges that come from consulting during lockdown outweighed the benefits that come from continuing with that piece of work there and then. That's something that we would need to look at on a case-by-case basis, but it certainly would be part of the prioritisation conversation that the senior leadership team has.
Thank you.
Right. Anybody else? No, doesn't seem to be anybody else. So would somebody like to move recommendation 1A to F? Gwyn Compton moved it. And Martin Holiday seconded it. Gwyn, do you want to write an intro?
Councillor Elliott has a comment.
A bit late, but okay, we'll hold that. Councillor Elliott?
Is it too late for debate, Your Worship?
No. Gwyn has got right of intro, then you can debate it.
Yep, great. I'm waiting. Yep.
Gwyn?
He's declining, Your Worship.
I thought his hand was in.
Can you hear me?
Okay, debates on. Who, Councillor Elliott?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Look, I just wanted to answer Sophie's question. And just note, I noted that last Thursday we had a meeting.
Are you debating this? Or are you?
Yes, I am.
Responding to the question?
I am debating it because it's part of, this wasn't a question for staff, but it's a comment that's usually saved for debate. That last Thursday's meeting, when we progressed the representational review process, in the week prior to that, or weeks prior to that, over 30 members of the public had indicated on social media or through other channels that they were going to publicly speak at that meeting. The meeting was transferred to Zoom. Still in the days up to it, a number of people were going to speak and fully intended to. No one did. There was a letter from, read out, thanks Jocelyn, from Graham Trask. Other than that, no one else made representation at that meeting. So it just indicated that whether or not the barrier is perceived or a real barrier, that this isn't as easy for the public as normally attending a meeting, coming along to chambers. That's not my only comment.
Right. Anybody else debating this? No. Otherwise, I'm going to put Gwyn, you write a reply.
He's declined.
Decline. So I'm going to put this resolution recommendation 1A to F, moved by Councillor Compton, seconded by Councillor Holiday. All those in favour, press your buttons.
We have 11 votes in favour.
Right, so that's carried. Item 8, public speaking time, there's nobody. Item 9, confirmation of public exclusive minutes, there's none. I now declare the meeting over. Thank you very much. Fastest meeting, I think. I'm not too sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jenny.